Rain streaked the windows of the Park Lux Hotel, blurring Manhattan's skyline into trembling silver lines. Clara Moreno pressed her coat tighter around her shoulders as she hurried through the marble lobby, her shoes squeaking softly on the wet floor. It was almost midnight, and the storm outside had turned the city into a wash of neon reflections and taxi horns. The receptionist handed her a keycard with a polite smile. Room 1207. "Welcome, Miss Moreno. Enjoy your stay." She thanked him absently, exhausted after her train was delayed, and her camera bag felt heavier with every step. All she wanted was a hot shower and silence. Upstairs, the hallway was hushed, except for the muted hum of distant elevators. Clara paused in front of the door marked 1207. Steam drifted faintly from underneath it, curling around her ankles like breath. She frowned. Maybe the previous guest had just checked out, or maybe the hotel's heating system was acting up. She was too tired to care. She slid the card into the slot. A green light blinked. Finally, she whispered and pushed the door open. Warm air hit her face, immediately thick with the scent of cedar soap and clean linen. She stepped inside, dropping her duffel on the carpet. A suitcase stood near the wall, black and expensive looking. She froze, puzzled. "Did they assign me the wrong room?" she murmured. The sound of running water came from the bathroom. Relief flickered for a second. Maybe she was sharing with another guest from the conference her friend Ava mentioned. She brushed damp hair from her cheek, walked closer, and reached for the lamp switch. The bathroom door swung open. A rush of steam poured out. And then she saw him. A tall man stepped into view, towel wrapped low around his hips, droplets sliding down his chest. His expression turned from calm to shock to something sharp as glass. "Who are you?" His voice cut through the hiss of the shower. Clara froze, eyes wide. "I'm so sorry, I think. Don't move," he snapped, stepping forward. His gaze flicked to her camera bag slung over her shoulder. "You're a reporter, aren't you? What no?" They sent you," he said more to himself than to her. "You're one of them." Before she could respond, he crossed the space between them in 3 long strides, grabbed the bag, and tossed it onto the bed. The zipper burst slightly, exposing her lenses. "Please stop," she cried, hands raised. "I'm not who you think I am." But he was already pulling open the bag, his movements sharp, angry, desperate. "Looking for dirt on me before tomorrow's board meeting. How much did they pay you? I don't even know who you are." The words spilled out, trembling. He stopped. Then the towel slipping a little at his waist. Steam rolled between them, like smoke after a gunshot. The nameplate from his briefcase glinted near the desk, Ethan Reynard. And suddenly she knew. The billionaire tech CEO, whose face was on every magazine that month. The man accused of manipulating his own company's stock. Her stomach twisted. "You're Ethan Reynard," she breathed. His jaw tightened. "And you're trespassing." Before either could say another word, a sharp knock rattled the door. "Hotel security." Sir Ethan exhaled roughly, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Come in," he muttered. 2 security officers entered, their radios crackling. Clara stammered. "There's been a mistake, the front desk they gave me." "We'll handle this, ma'am," one officer said gently. Ethan folded his arms cold again, watching as they guided her toward the hallway. "She had a camera," he said quietly. "Make sure she deletes whatever's on it." Clara turned back, rain still glistening in her hair. Eyes wide with humiliation and something else, defiance. "I didn't take any pictures," she said, "but if I did, maybe you'd see what fear looks like." For a moment, Silence filled the room. One of the guards checked her ID, nodded at Ethan. "It's a mix-up, Mr. Reynard. Wrong keycard. She's in 1307. Ethan's expression flickered, the steel melting into guilt. "Fine," he said. "Let her go." The guards apologized to her repeatedly as they escorted her to the elevator. Clara kept her head high, though her throat ached. When the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of him, standing in the doorway of 1207, a figure half-lit by golden light steam, swirling around him like smoke. He looked human then, tired, alone. The doors slid shut. In her new room, Clara sat on the edge of the bed, still trembling. Her reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger. She replayed the scene in her head, the fear, the accusation, the way his voice had cracked slightly when he said they sent you. Who did he mean, paparazzi competitors? Maybe tomorrow she'd laugh about it, but something told her she wouldn't. Downstairs, Ethan called the front desk, his voice tight. "The woman from earlier, is she all right?" "Yes, sir, we've apologized and upgraded her room." He hung up but didn't move. The sound of her voice lingered in his head. "I don't even know who you are." For the first time in months, that sentence hurt more than the headlines. He glanced at the mirror at the man he'd become, power without peace, wealth without trust. And somewhere in the storm outside, he wondered why the memory of her eyes refused to fade. When the thunder rolled again, he caught himself walking to the window, scanning the street below, searching for a face he'd never seen clearly enough. Night lingered over Manhattan like smoke. Ethan Reynard sat at the small desk in his hotel suite, the glow from the city flickering across the glass walls. His laptop screen displayed rows of numbers projections and the agenda for tomorrow's board meeting. Yet he had not read a single line. The sound of that woman's voice kept echoing through his head. "I don't even know who you are." He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid trembling as thunder grumbled far away. He had spent a decade building walls around his life, walls of control contracts and silence, and tonight a stranger had walked through them by accident. Or maybe fate. Her face haunted him, those wide eyes frightened, defiant, honest. For a man who lived among sharks and opportunists, honesty was more shocking than intrusion. He picked up the phone and called the front desk. The woman earlier, Clara Moreno. Did she leave the hotel? The clerk hesitated, checking the log. "No, sir. She's in 1307. Everything is fine." Ethan leaned back, exhaling slowly. Good. He ended the call and stared at the rain-streaked window. He should focus on the presentation on the merger that could restore his company's reputation after the stock manipulation rumors. But his mind wandered back to the camera bag, the fear in her eyes, the way she had said sorry as if she carried the weight of the world. Downstairs in room 11307, Clara sat at the window with her camera on her lap. The city below pulsed with life taxis flashing sirens, distant thunder softening into drizzle. She scrolled through old photos on her memory card, faces, street corners, moments she had captured when she still believed photography could change anything. The incident replayed in her head like a bad reel. His anger, the towel slipping the guards, the humiliation. Yet beneath it all, something else lingered, his confusion, his exhaustion. There had been fear in his voice, too. Who was he afraid of? She typed his name into her phone, half out of curiosity, half out of instinct. The search flooded with headlines. Ethan Reynard under investigation, billionaire. CEO under pressure, innovation, or manipulation. She read about his empire, his critics, the way journalists tore him apart for layoffs and ethics violations. Maybe that explained his paranoia, Maybe he really thought she was one of them. Still, she couldn't forgive how he'd looked at her, as if she were another enemy. Clara shut the screen and whispered, "You'll forget by morning." But she didn't. Ethan didn't either. Around 2 a.m., he found himself pacing the suite, the city humming below. He replayed the moment the door opened, the shock in her eyes, the innocence of her trembling voice. He poured another drink, then stopped disgusted. He had almost become the man the media said he was: cold, suspicious, detached. He walked to the desk, pulled up the hotel guest records, using the corporate account his assistant had booked under. Clara Moreno, freelancer, photography. He opened a browser tab and found a small portfolio site, simple, raw, full of unpolished beauty. Street portraits, working-class faces, mothers and children in dusty towns. The colors carried heart, not ambition, not greed. He felt something stir. He clicked on a photo titled "The Waiting Room." A little girl looking at a door, half-open, sunlight spilling in. The caption read, "Sometimes the wrong door is still light." He stared at that line for a long time. In another part of the city, Clara lay awake. The hum of the air conditioner reminded her of the noise from the train she'd taken that morning from Santa Fe. She thought of her late father, who used to tell her that every mistake has a reason. She smiled faintly. Maybe this one would too. But then she remembered his face, hard and accusing, and the smile faded. By morning, her phone buzzed. A message from Ava. "You won't believe this. I heard you're staying in the same hotel as Ethan Renard. Be careful, he's trouble." Clara sighed, setting the phone aside. She didn't need trouble. She needed work. Rent was due, and she had barely enough left for next week. She grabbed her camera and headed downstairs for breakfast. Ethan was already in the lobby, coffee untouched, pretending to read the newspaper. When she walked past, he glanced up just a fraction too long. She noticed. Their eyes met across the crowded room, a silent truce neither had planned. He almost called out, but stopped himself. Not yet. Instead, he told himself he'd find another way to make it right. That evening, as the city's lights flickered awake, Ethan called his assistant. "I need you to check something, a photographer named Clara Moreno. Find out where she works, who she freelances for." "Of course, sir. May I ask why?" "Just do it." He ended the call and looked again at her picture on the screen. The wrong door, he thought, the wrong time, but maybe the right person. Hours later, the assistant sent the report. Clara Moreno, independent contractor, former contributor to Modern Lens magazine. Blacklisted after a dispute over photo rights 2 years ago. No proven misconduct. Ethan read it twice, his jaw tightening. Someone had destroyed her reputation the same way his was being destroyed now. The coincidence felt almost cosmic. He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, the city whispering beyond the glass. Maybe he thought the world had sent her into his room, for a reason he didn't yet understand. The rain had stopped, leaving a thin fog over Manhattan. Downstairs, Clara walked past the hotel bar where businessmen laughed too loudly. She stopped near the elevator, watching her reflection in the polished metal. For the first time since she arrived, she let herself exhale. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it. As she stepped inside the elevator, she didn't see Ethan step out of another one, just a few feet away. They passed each other in silence, separated by seconds, bound by something neither of them could name. And somewhere in the night, both dreamed of doors, steam, and eyes that would not let go. The morning light spilled through the tall windows of the Park Lux Cafe, tinting the white marble tables in soft gold. Clara stood in line, clutching her camera bag and a notebook trying to look invisible. She had barely slept, haunted by the memory of last night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shock in his face, the water dripping down his hair, the accusation that had cut her deeper than she expected. She ordered coffee, her voice quiet, and moved to the counter to wait. A familiar figure entered just then, tall, composed suit, crisp despite the late night. Ethan Reynard. She stiffened instinctively, her grip tightening on the strap of her bag. He hadn't seen her yet. He walked to the counter, nodded to the barista, his expression unreadable. He was dressed like the man from the magazines, immaculate and unreachable. But when his gaze shifted and landed on her, the mask cracked slightly. A flicker of recognition, guilt, then something softer. Clara turned, pretending to read the menu. Too late. Miss Moreno, his voice came calm but low like a note of thunder. She turned slowly, forcing a polite smile. Mr. Reynard, may I? He gestured toward the empty table beside her. The cafe was full. Saying no would cause more attention. She nodded, setting her cup down. He sat across from her, folding his hands. For a long moment, silence pressed between them, broken only by the hum of espresso machines and murmured conversations. About last night, he began. There's nothing to say, she interrupted quietly. You thought I was a thief or worse, I understand. No, he said, you don't. I'm used to people breaking into my life for stories, pictures, leverage. It's not an excuse, but it's the only explanation I have. Clara took a sip of her coffee. You shouldn't treat everyone like they're the same. You're right. He paused. That's why I asked the front desk about you. I wanted to make sure they fixed their mistake. She looked at him cautious. Did you also ask them to delete my memory card? His lips twitched in something between regret and amusement. No, I should have trusted you. For a moment she saw the man behind the billionaire, tired, perhaps lonely. Apology accepted, she said finally, though the words carried a hint of irony. But maybe next time wait until someone actually commits a crime before calling security. He smiled faintly, the expression barely there but genuine. I'll keep that in mind. They both laughed softly, awkwardly. It eased the tension, if only a little. You're a photographer, he said after a while. Freelance, she corrected, which means I'm currently unemployed but hopeful. Your work, he said, surprising her. I looked it up. Her eyes widened. You what last night? Couldn't sleep. You've got talent. There's something raw about your portraits. She blinked, unsure whether to be flattered or suspicious. You really have time to look up strangers who walk into my shower, yes. She nearly choked on her coffee. He chuckled quietly, a sound that made the barista glance over and smile. You're impossible, she said, shaking her head. That's what my board says. The conversation drifted to safer topics, travel, work, the insanity of New York rent. He asked questions that weren't the polite kind, but the curious ones. She told him about her small town, about taking photos for the local paper before chasing bigger dreams. When she mentioned losing a job because of false accusations, his expression darkened. They said I manipulated a photo, she said. I didn't. But once a lie spreads, no one cares about the truth. He looked at her for a long time, then said softly, I know exactly what that feels like. His phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it. I have a meeting, he said, almost reluctant. But I'd like to make it up to you properly. Let me buy you breakfast tomorrow. You don't owe me anything, she said quickly. Maybe not, but I'd like to anyway. Before she could reply, his assistant appeared near the door, gesturing. Ethan stood, straightened his jacket. "Thank you for the conversation, Miss Moreno." "Clara," she corrected. "Clara," he repeated, as if testing the sound. Then he was gone, leaving behind the faint trace of cologne and confusion. She sat back, watching him disappear into the elevator. Maybe he was sincere. Maybe he was just trying to ease his conscience. Either way, something about him unsettled her, not in fear but in curiosity. Later that afternoon, as she left the cafe, she noticed a black car waiting by the curb. A man in a suit approached. "Miss Moreno." She hesitated. "Yes, Mr. Raynard asked me to deliver this." He handed her a sleek envelope. Inside was a card embossed with silver letters. "Raynard Innovations Press Event." Below it, a handwritten note. "I need someone who sees light differently. Breakfast offer still stands." She stared at the words, unsure whether to laugh or sigh. That night in her room, she placed the card on the nightstand. The city outside pulsed with distant horns and flashing lights. Somewhere across the building, he was probably doing the same, pretending to focus on numbers while thinking of everything but. For two people who had met in chaos, silence now felt strangely loud. Before turning off the lamp, she picked up her camera and snapped a picture of the empty chair across from her. The caption she whispered to herself was almost a prayer. A mistake worth remembering. The next morning dawned clear, the storm swept away, leaving Manhattan polished and bright. Clara woke earlier than usual, restless. The silver card lay on the nightstand, catching the sunlight, almost mocking her. She turned it over in her hands and read the handwritten note again. "I need someone who sees light differently. Breakfast offer still stands." She told herself she should ignore it, pack up, find another gig. But something about the way he had said her name yesterday lingered. She dressed simply, jeans, a cream shirt, camera slung across her shoulder, and went downstairs. The hotel restaurant buzzed with early meetings and laptop screens. Ethan was already there by the window, impeccably dressed, phone on the table, but untouched. When he saw her, he rose slightly, that controlled smile returning. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "Neither was I," she replied. They ordered coffee. For a moment, they just sat watching the city wake up. "Clara," he began carefully, "I have a proposal, not the kind you think." She raised an eyebrow. "Good to know. My company has a press event tomorrow. We're relaunching a product line, and I need new visuals. I'd like you to shoot it." She blinked. "Me? Why not your team of professionals?" "Because they see only what sells. You see what's real. And I think the world could use a little more of that." He said it so calmly, she almost believed it wasn't insane. "You realize this could look like favoritism or damage control after what happened. I do," he admitted. "But it's the right thing. Besides, I owe you a real apology, not just words." She studied him, trying to read the sincerity in his face. "All right," she said finally, "but I get full creative control." Agreed. The way he said it felt like more than a business deal. He glanced at her camera. "That's the one from last night." "Yes, still works despite your heroic rescue attempt." He smiled faintly. "I'd like to think I left it better than before." She rolled her eyes. "You left a dent in my trust, if that counts." His laughter came softly, surprising even himself. They spent the next hour discussing logistics, lighting backdrop attendees. Yet beneath every practical detail, an unspoken energy pulsed. When their hands brushed, reaching for the same coffee pot, both paused. Something in the air shifted. Outside traffic horns blended with the murmur of the city. but inside the world narrowed to 2 cups, 2 people, and a silence that said everything. That afternoon, they met again in the conference hall to set up the shoot. Technicians hurried with cables. PR staff whispered into headsets. Clara moved with quiet focus, adjusting angles, testing frames. Ethan watched from across the room, admiring the way she commanded space without raising her voice. There was grace in her precision, warmth in her composure. When she caught him staring, she raised an eyebrow. "You're distracting," she said. "I'm the client," he countered. "Then you should look like one, not like you're waiting for a verdict." She lifted the camera, snapped a photo before he could protest. The shutter clicked crisp, intimate. "Better," she said. He approached, curious. "Let me see." She turned the screen toward him. The photo showed him mid-thought light, slicing across his jaw, a rare vulnerability in his eyes. He exhaled. "You make me look human." "That's because you are," she said quietly. For a heartbeat, neither looked away. Then a voice broke in Gabriel, his PR director, sharp, in a tailored suit. "Ethan, we need you in prep for the board call." Gabriel's eyes flicked to Clara with polite suspicion. "And you are Clara Moreno," Ethan said before she could answer. "Our photographer for tomorrow." Gabriel's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. "Understood." When he left, Clara murmured, "I'm not sure he approves." "He doesn't have to," Ethan replied. "You do your job, he does his." She smiled, spoken like a real CEO. "Or a man trying not to lose another argument," he said. The session went smoothly. By evening, most of the shots were done. Clara packed her lenses while Ethan lingered near the stage. The city outside turned copper under sunset, and for once he didn't rush to his next meeting. "Thank you," he said, "for taking the job." "You're welcome," she said, and meant it. "Tomorrow will be fine. Just remember to breathe." He laughed softly. "You sound like my therapist. Do billionaires have those?" "Only the ones trying to stay human." The elevator ride back to their rooms was quiet, both lost in thought. When the doors opened at her floor, she turned to him. "Try not to accuse anyone else of espionage tonight." "Only if they don't walk into my room uninvited," he said. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Ethan." In her room, she uploaded the day's photos. One image caught her attention, the one she'd taken of him, unaware the brief second where his mask had dropped. She zoomed in, tracing the line of light across his face. She didn't know why she saved it in a separate folder labeled simply Truth. Across the hall, Ethan poured a glass of water and stared out at the skyline. For the first time in months, the city felt less like a battlefield and more like a possibility. He thought of her laugh, the way she'd teased him about trust the warmth that crept back into his chest. Tomorrow would be public, full of cameras and investors, but tonight he allowed himself one quiet thought. Maybe not every door that opens by mistake is a mistake at all. The evening of the gala shimmered like liquid gold over Manhattan. Park Lux had transformed its ballroom into a constellation of crystal lights, mirrored walls, and soft jazz humming from hidden speakers. Ethan adjusted his cufflinks as cameras flashed in the hallway, outside his reflection, looking like every headline ever written about him, powerful, untouchable, alone. Night was supposed to be his redemption, a press event, to prove that Renard Innovations was more than scandal and speculation. Yet his thoughts kept drifting toward the woman holding the camera by the bar. Quietly adjusting her settings, her brown hair catching the glow of chandeliers, Clara moved through the crowd with the precision of a dancer, capturing smiles, handshakes, champagne bubbles bursting midair. He watched her for a moment too long before Gabriel appeared at his side, whispering about investors and image management. Stay charming, Gabriel said. And stay away from the photographer. Optics matter. Ethan gave a thin smile that did not reach his eyes. Optics are her job. He walked toward the stage, heart thudding harder than it should. The announcer's voice echoed through the speakers. Please welcome Ethan Reynard. Applause rippled across the room. Clara raised her camera, framing him beneath the soft light. Through her lens, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man, standing on the edge of something fragile. His speech was sharp, rehearsed, but when his gaze found hers across the crowd, he faltered for half a second. She clicked the shutter, capturing that slip, the exact moment humanity leaked through his armor. Afterward, the applause rolled like thunder. Gabriel smiled tightly, whispering congratulations to the board. Ethan stepped down, ignoring reporters who hurled questions about ethics and innovation. He scanned the room until he saw her near the window, photographing the skyline reflected in champagne glasses. You didn't photograph me enough, he said softly behind her. She turned, startled but smiling. You were already surrounded by lenses. I wanted to show something different. What did you see then? A man trying to remember what hope looks like. Her honesty disarmed him. You talk like you write poetry. Maybe I just shoot it, she said. The orchestra started another song, slower this time. Couples drifted to the dance floor under golden lights. He hesitated before extending a hand. Dance with me. She blinked. Ethan, people will talk. They always do. She placed her camera down and her hand in his. The music wrapped around them like silk. They moved slowly, carefully, not touching too much but not enough either. For a man known for control, his pulse betrayed him, quick and uneven. She fit into his arms like a thought he'd tried to forget. Around them, laughter and flashbulbs blurred into silence. For a moment, it felt as if the city outside had stopped breathing. You're surprisingly good at this, she murmured. I learned young. My mother believed no man should be powerful without grace. Smart woman. She was, he said quietly, until she died in a storm. Clara looked up. I'm sorry, don't be, he said. You didn't know. They swayed another beat. She felt his hand tighten slightly at her waist, steady but unsure. When the song ended, they didn't move apart right away. You're going to make Gabriel faint, she whispered. Ethan chuckled, the sound low, almost tender. Let him faint. It would be his most human moment this year. She laughed softly, pulling back. I should get back to work. Right, work. He released her hand reluctantly. The rest of the evening blurred conversations, flashbulbs, polite smiles. Yet every time she lifted her camera, she found him somewhere in the background watching her. Later, when the crowd thinned and the orchestra packed up, Clara lingered by the balcony to capture the city at midnight. The air was crisp, the lights below endless. She didn't hear him approach until his voice cut through the quiet. Thank you for tonight, he said. For doing this. You don't need to thank me. It's my job. Still, he said, leaning on the railing beside her. It felt like more than work. She lowered her camera slowly. For a few seconds, maybe it was. You have a gift, he said. You see people the way they want to be seen, and you hide the way everyone expects you to. Their eyes met again, closer this time, the night folding around them. For one impossible heartbeat, the city disappeared. Then Gabriel's voice echoed from the doorway. Ethan, the press is waiting for a statement. The spell broke. Clara stepped back, gathering her equipment. Go, she said softly. Your world's calling. He hesitated, then nodded. Good night, Clara. Good night, Ethan. When he walked away, she turned the camera on herself, capturing her reflection in the glass face, half in shadow, half in light. A man trying to remember what hope looks like. She whispered, echoing her own words. Across the ballroom, Ethan stopped at the doorway and looked back once. She was gone, just her camera strap swinging gently against the chair. He smiled faintly to himself, the first real smile in years, then faced the crowd. Behind him, the city glowed like a promise neither of them yet understood. The following night was quieter, stripped of champagne laughter and flashing bulbs. The board meeting had ended, the press dispersed, but Ethan remained restless. He found himself standing at his office window inside the top floor of Renard Innovations, staring at the skyline as if the city might answer questions he couldn't voice. Clara had delivered the photos earlier that day, each image capturing something he hadn't expected: truth. No polish, no propaganda, just reality painted with light. One picture of him mid-laugh, one of Gabriel looking almost kind, one of the staff whispering before the curtain rose. She'd seen through everyone, including him. He called her. "Can you come by the office tonight?" Her hesitation crackled through the line. "At this hour, it's the only hour I can trust." She laughed softly. "You're lucky I'm still awake." 30 minutes later, she stood in his office, camera slung over her shoulder. The city lights shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, washing them both in pale blue. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. "I did," he said. "There's one more portrait I need, the official one for the board." "Now?" she asked. "Now," he said, smiling faintly. She sighed, amused. "Fine. Sit down, Mr. Reynard." "Ethan," he corrected. "Only if you stop pretending I intimidate you." "Who says I'm pretending?" she teased. He laughed quietly, and for once the sound didn't echo against stone. She adjusted the lighting, her movements practiced and precise. "You've done this before," he said. "I've had to reinvent people before." "Yes," she replied. "But you're tricky." "Tricky?" "You hide behind control, but your eyes ruin it." He met her gaze. "Then I'll look away." "Don't," she said softly. "That's when the truth disappears." For a long moment they just stared at each other while the shutter clicked. She stepped closer, fixing the collar of his shirt, brushing lint from his jacket. Then came the moment neither expected. He reached for a tie from the drawer and frowned. "Which one?" "The navy," she said, immediately taking it from him. "It softens you." "Softens? You can't look like you're about to fire everyone." He smiled. "Show me then." She stepped behind him, her fingers brushing the back of his neck as she looped the fabric. His pulse quickened absurdly, aware of her breath near his ear. "You're terrible at this," she teased, her voice lighter now. "For someone so powerful." "I told you," he murmured, "control isn't the same as coordination." She laughed quietly, tying the knot and smoothing it down. "There," she whispered. "Almost human." He turned to face her. "Almost, you're getting there." The silence that followed was soft, charged. The city seemed to pause outside as if watching. "Dinner?" he asked suddenly. "Here, unless you have somewhere better to be." "I was planning on editing photos," she said. "That sounds tragic," he replied, picking up his phone. Within minutes, takeout arrived, Thai food still steaming. They ate at his desk, chopsticks clumsy in his hand, her laughter echoing across the glass. For a while they talked about everything except business. She told him about her hometown in New Mexico, the desert sunsets, the one camera her father had left her. He spoke about his mother, how she used to say, "Success without empathy was just loneliness wearing a suit." Clara listened, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone. "You miss her," she said. "Every day," he admitted. And you, I miss who I was. Before I tried to prove myself, she said. Before the headlines, before the labels. He nodded, understanding. Maybe we both forgot what we started for. Maybe, she said softly. Their eyes met again. She saw not the billionaire but the boy, still standing behind his mother's shadow. He saw not the photographer but the woman who carried truth like light. The distance between them felt fragile, sacred. When the meal was over, she stood to leave. I'll send the final edits tomorrow, she said. He walked her to the elevator. Clara, he said as the doors opened, thank you for tonight. For what? For reminding me what normal feels like. She smiled. You should try it more often. He watched her disappear behind the closing doors, the echo of her laughter lingering in the hallway. Back in his office, he stared at the portrait she'd taken. It wasn't perfect, but it was him, the weary honesty in his eyes, the faint curve of a smile he didn't recognize. For the first time in months, he printed a copy and pinned it above his desk. Across the city, Clara sat in her room, scrolling through the shots from that night. When she reached the one where he was laughing mid-sentence, she hesitated. The frame captured something rare joy, fleeting but real. She saved it under a new folder, Things Worth Keeping. Outside New York shimmered like a promise. Two souls bound by accident, drifting closer, with every photograph unaware that the light they had begun to find in each other was about to be tested by the shadows waiting at dawn. The morning began, with sunlight glancing off mirrored towers and headlines waiting to be written. Ethan walked into his office, feeling unusually light. The portrait Clara had taken still hung above his desk, a small rebellion against the cynicism that ruled his world. The board meeting later that day would finalize a merger months in the making. Everything seemed under control until Gabriel stormed into the room, holding a phone, his face pale. "We have a problem," he said. Ethan frowned. "What now?" Gabriel turned the screen toward him. The photo filled the display. Clara standing close, adjusting Ethan's tie. Her smile soft, his expression unguarded. The caption beneath screamed across social media, "Billionaire CEO's secret romance. Who is the woman behind the lens?" For a heartbeat, Ethan could not breathe. Where did this come from? "Every outlet has it," Gabrielle said. "Someone leaked it overnight. It's viral. #Billionaire and the photographer." Ethan felt the room tilt. Damage control, now. Gabriel nodded, already dialing PR contacts. "It's bad. The press is spinning it as manipulation, claiming you staged the romance to distract from the merger scandal." Within an hour, chaos ignited. News vans lined the street outside Reynard Innovation. Testers held signs about corruption and corporate lies. The company's stock plunged 5% before noon. Ethan's phone erupted with calls from investors demanding answers. In the midst of it, his assistant handed him a printed statement from PR. "Deny all personal involvement. Terminate the photographer immediately." Ethan stared at the paper. His mind flashed back to the night she tied his tie, the quiet laughter, the truth in her eyes. "Get me Clara," he said. She arrived an hour later, escorted by security through a sea of flashing cameras. Her expression was bewildered hurt. "Ethan, what's happening?" "The photos," he said quietly. "They were leaked." What she whispered. "That's impossible. Only you and Gabriel had access to the files." "And you," Gabriel interjected smoothly from behind. Clara turned offended. "Are you accusing me?" "We're not accusing anyone," Gabriel said, "but the timeline enough." Ethan cut in. "We'll find out who did it." But even as he spoke, he felt the eyes of his board, his staff, his investors, waiting for him to protect their image. Gabriel leaned close, whispering, "She's the only variable, Ethan. If we don't act, we'll lose control of the narrative." Ethan hesitated. Every instinct he'd built in business screamed to contain, the fallout to sacrifice one to save thousands. But this wasn't a calculation, it was a person. Clara's voice trembled. "You think I'd do this after everything I don't know," he said, and the words broke her. Her face hardened. "You don't know me at all." "Clara, wait." "No," she said. "You had the chance to trust me. You didn't take it." Security waited by the door. She turned to them before he could speak again. "Don't bother escorting me. I know the way out." She left without looking back, her camera strap trailing behind her like a line cut loose. Gabriel exhaled as the door closed. "You did the right thing. We'll spin this as a misunderstanding." Ethan didn't answer. He stared at the photo still open on his monitor, the moment that had felt so innocent, now weaponized into scandal. Outside chants rose from the crowd. By evening, the company's shares were bleeding red investors. Furious media headlines relentless. The billionaire's hidden affair, truth behind the tie, another lie from Reynard Innovations. Ethan shut off the screen, the noise unbearable. In the silence that followed, regret took shape. He poured a drink, but couldn't bring himself to touch it. He thought of her eyes when she said, "I don't know me at all." He knew then that he'd destroyed something purer than reputation trust. Clara walked through the streets, clutching her camera to her chest, as if it were armor. Reporters shouted her name outside the hotel. "Miss Moreno, did you leak the pictures?" She kept walking, tears stinging. By nightfall, her agency terminated her contract, citing unprofessional conduct. She packed her bags in silence. When Ava called, she ignored it. When Ethan called hours later, she let it ring until it stopped. Somewhere in the city, thunder rolled again, though no storm came. In his penthouse, Ethan stood by the window, watching news drones hover over his building like vultures. "This will pass," Gabrielle said. "You'll make a statement tomorrow, distance yourself, and she'll fade out of the headlines." Ethan turned, his expression unreadable. "That's what you said about my conscience once." It didn't. "Ethan, be reasonable. Reasonable." He repeated softly the word, bitter in his mouth. He walked to his desk, tore the PR statement in half, and dropped it in the trash. "Get out, Gabrielle." Gabriel hesitated. "You're making a mistake." "I already did," Ethan said. Alone again, he stared at the empty chair across from him and imagined her sitting there, camera in hand, daring him to tell the truth. The city pulsed below like a living wound. He realized he could lose the company and survive, but losing her was something else entirely. The next morning, Clara's apartment was empty. She had vanished without forwarding address. Her phone disconnected, her website deleted. Ethan's world remained loud, yet every sound reminded him of silence. 3 days after the leak, the city that had once worshipped Ethan Reynard now seemed to watch him fall with quiet satisfaction. Every network dissected his scandal. Every headline turned his life into a cautionary tale about arrogance and power. He sat through meetings that felt like interrogations, his legal team whispering about liability, while investors threatened to pull out of the merger. The portrait Clara had taken still hung above his desk, and though Gabriel had suggested removing it, Ethan refused. "Leave it," he said coldly. "Let everyone see what honesty looks like." But by evening, the weight of the silence was unbearable. When the building emptied, he poured himself a drink and stood before the window, watching the neon glow of Times Square, pulse like a heartbeat he could no longer match. Somewhere in the noise below, her face flashed on a news ticker. The caption read, "Photographer denies affair, blames Billionaire's PR team." He turned off the television, unable to watch. Regret clung to him like humidity. Every word he hadn't said to her now echoed as an accusation. He'd believed lies before, but this one was his own making. Across the country, Clara had fled New York on the first flight south. She ended up in a small desert town in New Mexico, where the air tasted of dust and quiet. She rented a room above a diner, took odd jobs, and used her camera only for children who came after school to learn. They laughed when she showed them how to frame sunlight, how to wait for the right moment before clicking. In those faces, she found a fragile kind of peace. Still, some nights she woke, gasping the memory of his eyes haunting her the way he had looked at her before he chose to doubt her. She told herself it didn't matter, but it did. Back in Manhattan, Ethan attended a shareholders' meeting that felt like a trial. Gabriel stood at the head of the table, spinning narratives to save the company. "We'll release a statement tomorrow, blaming an internal breach. The public needs a scapegoat, not a confession." Ethan stared out the window. "And if the scapegoat is innocent?" Gabriel's voice hardened. "Then she should have been smarter." Ethan turned his jaw tight. "You sound like the man I never wanted to become." The room fell silent. "Gentlemen," Ethan said, "standing the merger is off." "I won't rebuild this company on lies." "You'll destroy it," someone shouted. "Maybe," he said. "But I'd rather destroy what's false than protect what's rotten." He left before they could stop him. That night, he walked alone through the rain. No chauffeur, no umbrella, just the sound of his shoes against wet pavement. When he reached the Park Lux, the same hotel where everything began, he hesitated at the revolving doors. Inside, the lobby glowed with warm light and polished marble. It looked exactly the same, yet everything had changed. He asked for the same suite, 1207. The clerk recognized him and nodded silently. When he entered the room, the air still smelled faintly of cedar and glass cleaner. He turned on the shower, listening to the water crash against the tiles, remembering the moment she'd walked in, the surprise, the chaos, the way she'd looked both terrified and alive. He laughed softly to himself, the sound breaking halfway into something like sorrow. He stayed there for hours, letting the noise fill the silence that had taken root inside him. Across the country, Clara finished her day at the community center. The children had gone home and the last light of sunset poured through the dusty windows. She looked at the photos pinned on the wall, smiling faces, hands covered in paint. Innocence, untouched by cynicism. She picked up her old camera, the one she had promised never to use for work again. The lens had a small scratch near the edge, a scar like hers. She took one photo of the empty classroom, then another of her reflection in the glass. Her expression surprised her, stronger, calmer. She whispered to herself, "You're still here." Meanwhile, Ethan sat at his desk drafting a letter he didn't plan to send. "Clara, I wanted to build an empire that no one could tear down. Instead, I built a wall even truth couldn't climb. I hope you're somewhere with light, not noise." He folded it, tucked it inside a drawer, and closed it like sealing away confession. Weeks passed. The scandal faded, replaced by newer outrages. But the damage remained. Employees left, investors sold, and Gabriel grew colder by the day. "You've cost us everything," he said one morning. Ethan replied quietly, "No, I just finally paid the price." That evening he left the office without telling anyone and drove aimlessly until the city lights dissolved into countryside. He ended up by the Hudson, where the water mirrored the stars. He thought about his mother, about her saying, "Success without empathy is loneliness in disguise." He closed his eyes and let the words settle. Somewhere in another time zone, Clara sat outside her rented room, watching the same stars stretch across the desert sky. For the first time since leaving New York, she felt no anger, only a strange ache that wasn't pain anymore. It was memory turning into distance. She whispered his name once softly, as if testing whether it still hurt. It did, but not as much. That night she dreamed of doors again, of the one she had opened by mistake, of steam and silence, and eyes that saw her before the world remembered her name. When morning came, she woke with a decision she couldn't explain, to forgive not for him, but for herself. And somewhere in Manhattan, Ethan opened his eyes to the same dawn and realized forgiveness might be the only redemption left. 3 months slipped by like fading headlines, and the world that once revolved around Ethan Renard had grown strangely still. The offices of Renard Innovations were quieter now. The energy drained, the chatter replaced by the sterile hum of computers. He came in every morning, signed papers he no longer believed in, and left before sunset to avoid the hollow congratulations of men who still feared him. The company was surviving, but he was not. His portrait still hung behind his desk, taken by Clara in better days. He sometimes stared at it during meetings, wondering how a photograph could look more alive than the man it captured. The board had pushed Gabrielle into interim leadership. Investors were calmer now, the stock slowly recovering, but Ethan felt none of the relief. He walked through the hallways like a ghost, and when he passed his own reflection in the mirrored walls, he barely recognized himself. Every night he wrote letters he never sent. "Clara, I still see you in the way sunlight hits glass. I wonder if you've forgiven me." "I haven't forgiven myself." He folded each one neatly and locked them in the drawer beneath the photograph. In the silence of his penthouse, he began to live smaller coffee alone, dinners forgotten, news turned off. He avoided the internet entirely. He told himself he was protecting his sanity, but in truth he was afraid that seeing her name again would break what little resolve he had left. Somewhere far from the noise, Clara was rebuilding her life one breath at a time. The town in New Mexico had started to feel like home. Her class of photography students had grown from 5 children to 15. They came with dusty shoes and wide eyes, carrying second-hand cameras donated from nearby towns. She taught them how to frame a story, how light could turn the ordinary into something divine. They called her Miss Clara and begged her to tell stories about New York. Sometimes she did, but never about him. The locals had come to love her quiet warmth. At the diner below her apartment, the owner saved her a seat by the window. In the evenings, she'd sit there with a cup of coffee and her notebook jotting ideas for a book she'd never admit she was writing. She rarely looked at the news, but one morning an old man at the diner slid a newspaper toward her. "Thought you might like this," he said. The headline was small, tucked away in the business section. "Renard Innovations donates $50 million to Rural Education Fund." She froze. Beneath the headline was a photograph of Ethan, looking thinner, older but calm. The caption read, "When asked why Mr. Renard simply said, 'Because truth deserves a chance to start over.'" Her throat tightened. She folded the paper gently, unsure whether to smile or cry. That evening, she went to the community center early. The children had drawn pictures for her mountains camera's sunsets. One little girl, Sophia, handed her a crumpled envelope. "For you," she said shyly. Inside was a photo of Clara, standing in the middle of the classroom, laughing, sunlight spilling across her hair. "Sophia took it," one of the boys said proudly. Clara smiled. "It's perfect." For the first time in months, she felt light again. That night, she took out her old laptop and browsed through her archived files, the photos she'd kept hidden since New York. When she found the one of Ethan looking out the window, his reflection merging with the city behind him, she hesitated. The man in the photo didn't look powerful, he looked human. Without realizing it, she whispered, "Maybe we were both just trying to find light." She didn't send him a message, she didn't have to. But somewhere inside, something shifted bitterness, turning into memory. Memory turning into forgiveness. Back in Manhattan, Ethan stood on his balcony overlooking the skyline. The city no longer felt like an empire, it felt like a test he'd finally failed. Yet failure brought a strange kind of peace. He was meeting with his legal team the next day to finalize his resignation. He had written one final statement, short and plain. "Truth built this company once. It should again without me." Before bed, he opened the drawer and took out one of his letters to her. He read it under the lamplight, his handwriting uneven from the night he'd written it. "If you walk into my life again, I won't ask why. I'll just say welcome home." He smiled faintly at the absurd hope still alive in him. He folded the letter and placed it by the window. The wind through the cracked pane rustled it slightly, as if carrying it somewhere unseen. Weeks passed. Clara's community project received an anonymous donation, new cameras, tripods, and lights. No one knew who sent them, but she did. She stood by the children as they unpacked the boxes, her heart full and heavy. Later, when she walked home through the desert dusk, she lifted her camera and captured the horizon where the sun met the earth, the light spilling into shadow. It looked like forgiveness. She titled it "The Silence." Meanwhile, Ethan handed his final keys to the company's new CEO and walked out of Renard Innovations for the last time. No reporters, no statements, no fanfare. Just a man walking into anonymity with the weight of mistakes and the faint spark of redemption in his chest. That night, both of them looked at the same sky from different worlds. He whispered her name once, not to the city, but to the quiet between stars. And somewhere thousands of miles away, she lifted her camera toward that same sky, pressed the shutter, and caught the silence that finally felt like peace. The truth revealed itself not in headlines or grand gestures, but in the small flicker of a name buried deep in an archived email. It was Ava who found it, first scrolling through her old messages late one night. Clara had once copied her on correspondence from Reynard Innovations during the Gala project. The leak that destroyed her life had come from a file transfer logged under an unfamiliar account, Gabriel Chen. Ava's heart pounded as she cross-checked timestamps. Every upload, every file sent to the media matched his activity. She didn't hesitate. The next morning, she called Ethan's old assistant, who reluctantly gave her his private number. "It's urgent," Ava said, when he answered his voice gravelly from sleep. "You need to see something." Within hours, Ethan sat across from her in a small cafe in Soho. He looked older, but there was clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Ava slid a folder across the table. "I kept everything she said. You'll want to read page 3. He opened the file, scanning the printouts. His stomach tightened as realization dawned. It was him, he whispered. Gabriel. He used Clara's credentials to leak the images, Ava said. He needed someone to blame. You fired him for ethics violations last quarter, right? Ethan nodded slowly, anger simmering beneath his calm. He said the leak came from her computer. He even showed me fake evidence. Then you know what you have to do. Ethan sat back, exhaling. I do. That night, he booked a flight to Albuquerque. His resignation had freed him from corporate ties, but not from guilt. The plane lifted through clouds and left the city's neon behind. As he looked out the window, he rehearsed what he would say if he saw her again. Nothing seemed enough. When the plane landed, he drove for hours through desert roads until the sky turned crimson. The small town appeared like a mirage. Quiet streets, weathered buildings, the distant laughter of children. He found the community center easily. A handmade sign read, "Free art classes for kids." He stepped inside just as she was packing up paints and cameras. For a moment, he couldn't speak. She looked different, sun-touched, grounded at peace. Ethan, she said softly, almost like a question. How did you find me? A friend, he replied. And the truth. He held out the folder. It was Gabriel. He leaked the photos, not you. Her eyes widened as she read the documents. You came all this way to tell me that no, he said quietly. I came because I was wrong, and because I needed to see you. The children's laughter drifted in from outside. She set the papers down, meeting his gaze. You destroyed my career, Ethan. I know. You doubted me when all I gave you was honesty. I know, he said again, voice breaking. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth before it's too late. She studied him for a long time. Too late for what? For me to tell you what you were to me, he said. You reminded me what being human felt like. You walked into my life by mistake, and I spent months pretending it wasn't the best accident that ever happened. Tears stung her eyes before she could stop them. Why now? Because I saw the same sky every night and realized it was missing your light. She shook her head, torn between anger and something deeper. You can't just appear and expect things to go back. I don't want them to, he said. I just want to start from the truth. Outside, the desert wind rose, stirring dust and sunlight through the open door. For a long time they said nothing, the air heavy with years of silence. Then a voice called from outside, Miss Clara, the bus is here. She wiped her eyes quickly. I have to take them home. Let me help, he said. She hesitated, then nodded. Together they guided the children to the waiting bus. A little girl tugged at his sleeve. Are you Miss Clara's friend? Ethan smiled faintly. I hope so. When the bus pulled away, the town fell quiet again. Clara turned to him. What will you do now? Fix what I can. Tell the truth publicly. That won't change what happened. Maybe not. But it might keep it from happening again. She looked down at the folder, still in her hands. If you want to make it right, she said finally, do it the way you should have from the start, by standing in the light, not behind it. He nodded, understanding. The next morning, Ethan returned to New York. At the annual Tech Summit, he walked onto the stage unannounced during the opening speech. The crowd erupted in confusion. I no longer represent Raynard Innovations, he began, but I owe you the truth. Cameras turned. A year ago, I let ambition blind me. I believed lies because they were convenient. And I hurt someone who deserved better. He paused, scanning the audience. The leak that destroyed both our reputations came from inside my company. Not from her. Her name is Clara Moreno, and she taught me that truth doesn't hide in shadows, it shines. The silence that followed was absolute. Then slowly applause began. Reporters rushed the stage. Ethan ignored them. He left the summit, quietly boarding the next flight south. Back in New Mexico, Clara was preparing her lesson when her phone buzzed nonstop. Headlines filled the screen. Ethan Renard exposes corporate betrayal. Publicly clears photographer's name. She sank into a chair, covering her mouth with her hand. The kids ran in shouting, "Miss Clara, you're on TV." She laughed through tears, the sound shaking. That evening she stood outside the center as the sun dipped behind the mountains. A car pulled up, and he stepped out, wind in his hair dust clinging to his shoes. "You missed your flight," she said, half smiling. "I did," he answered on purpose. Why? Because some truths deserve to be seen in person. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a check, made out to the Light Project. For the kids, he said, not for forgiveness. She folded it back into his hand. They already have enough. What they need is someone to teach them what light really means. He looked at her uncertain. She nodded toward the open door. "Stay and find out." The next morning, the desert woke in colors softer than forgiveness. Clara unlocked the doors of the community center, sunlight spilling over the photographs on the wall. Images of children laughing, mountains glowing, and a sky too wide to hold regret. She didn't hear the footsteps at first, only the low creak of the door, followed by a voice she already knew. "You start early," Ethan said, standing in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. She turned, half smiling. Habit. He offered one to her. Peace offering. She took it, but said nothing, sipping quietly as the light grew stronger around them. "You don't give up easily," she said at last. "If I did, I wouldn't be here." You already fixed everything, she said. "The world knows the truth. Isn't that enough?" "No," he said, "because I broke something I can't fix with press releases or charity. I broke trust." She studied him. "And what are you planning to do about it?" "Learn," he said simply. "From you, from them." He nodded toward the children's artwork hanging on the wall. She laughed softly. "You the billionaire who terrified reporters, ex-billionaire," he corrected. "Now I'm just a man who doesn't know how to thread a camera strap." She looked at him for a long moment, then motioned for him to follow her outside. The morning air was cool, the horizon wide and endless. "If you really want to learn," she said, handing him a camera, "start with light." She positioned him near the fence, guiding his hands gently. "You don't chase it, you wait for it." "Patience isn't my strong suit," he said. "It wasn't mine either," she replied, "till the world forced me to slow down." For the next hour they worked side by side, photographing the landscape, the children arriving, the way light touched everything it forgave. Every so often, their hands brushed, and neither pulled away. When a little boy ran up, holding a broken camera, Ethan knelt instinctively inspecting it. "It's fixable," he said, glancing up at Clara. "You're better at this than you think." "I had a good teacher," he said quietly. Later, when the children left for lunch, she found him inside the classroom, staring at the photo wall. His eyes lingered on a framed picture of her taken by one of the students, Clara laughing, sunlight in her hair. "They see you the way I should have," he said. "And how's that, as someone who makes broken things work again?" She turned to face him. "You're not broken, Ethan. Then why do I feel like I've been rebuilding my soul from dust?" "Because you're finally doing it right," she said gently. You're using your hands instead of your money. He smiled faintly. I've missed your sarcasm. It's free, she said. No corporate cost. The laughter faded into quiet understanding. Outside, the wind rustled through the dry grass like a hymn. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a restored camera, polished and gleaming. I fixed this, he said. She took it, eyes widening. My old camera. I thought it was gone. It was, he said. I found it when I cleaned out my office. I had it repaired. There's something engraved on it. She turned it over. On the metal plate, 3 words shone in delicate script: truth, light, love. Her breath caught. You remembered. I remember everything he said, especially the things I didn't deserve. She looked down, fighting the tremor in her voice. Why do this? Because it's the only way I know how to tell you I'm still the man you saw that night, the one trying to remember what hope looks like. The silence between them deepened heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, she whispered, "And what do you want from me now?" A chance, he said simply, not to erase what happened, but to build something honest from it. She stepped closer, her eyes searching his. Honesty is harder than love, Ethan. Then let's start with that, he said. The sun climbed higher, casting light across the floor between them. She lifted the camera slowly, pointing it at him. Don't move, she said. I want to remember this. The shutter clicked once. You still photograph me like I'm worth saving, he murmured. Maybe you are, she replied. Or maybe I just see what's left after pride burns away. He smiled, the kind that began in his chest and softened every line of his face. He reached for her hand, tentative, seeking permission. She didn't pull away. Instead, she intertwined her fingers with his. You walked into the wrong room, he said, voice, barely above a whisper, but the right life. Her eyes glistened. You really believe that I do, he said, because it's the only thing that's ever made sense. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their kiss was quiet, hesitant, more healing than passion, the kind that rewrote endings. For a moment the world stood still, the desert, the children's laughter in the distance, the ghosts of their past dissolving into light. When they finally pulled apart, she smiled through tears. You're late for class, she said. Then you'll have to keep teaching me, he replied. Forever's a long course. That afternoon, they stood outside, helping the children hang their photographs on a line strung between 2 old trees. Ethan lifted one frame, a picture of Clara and the kids under the sunlight. You're building something here, he said. Something real. So are you, she said. You just traded skyscrapers for sky. As the sun began to set, he wrapped his arm around her, both of them, silent as color bled across the horizon. For the first time since everything fell apart, neither of them looked away from the light. A year later, the Museum of Modern Art in New York hummed with soft voices and slow footsteps. The echo of polished shoes on marble, blending with the hush of reverence that filled its glass corridors. At the center of the newest exhibition stood a photograph titled Light Beyond the Door. It showed a narrow hallway, half lit by morning sun, a single door cracked open, light pouring through like revelation. Beneath the photo, the small plaque read, by Clara Moreno. Visitors stopped, lingered, whispered. Some said it looked like hope. Others said it felt like forgiveness. In a quiet corner of the gallery, Clara stood with her hands clasped, the camera strap hanging across her shoulder. She wore a simple black dress, her hair tucked behind her ears, no longer the nervous freelancer who had walked into the wrong hotel room a lifetime ago. When the curator approached, smiling, she only nodded politely. "Congratulations," the woman said. "Your work is extraordinary. There's something so human about it." "Thank you," Clara replied softly. Her gaze drifted beyond the glass wall to the city shimmering outside. For a moment, she thought she saw him in the reflection. Tall and calm, the faintest trace of a smile touching his lips. And then he was there, not a reflection, but real, stepping through the crowd, as if drawn by light itself. Ethan Renard, dressed simply, no longer the billionaire on magazine covers, but a man who had traded his empire for peace. His hair was longer now, a little gray at the temples, his posture still steady, but unguarded. When he reached her, he said quietly, "You didn't tell me they hung it here. You'd have made it a press event," she teased. "I'm done with those," he said. "I just wanted to see the door that changed everything." They stood side by side, looking at the photograph. "Do you remember that night?" she asked. "Every second," he said. "The steam, the confusion, your voice saying, 'I'm sorry.' I didn't know it then, but that was the sound of my life starting over." "And this?" she asked, nodding toward the photo. "What does it mean to you?" He took a slow breath. "It means there's always light if you're brave enough to open the door." She smiled faintly. "You sound like the man I hoped you'd become." "You made sure I did," he said, "even when you weren't there." They walked together through the gallery, pausing at other photographs, children from her project in New Mexico. Landscapes glowing with quiet grace, portraits of people who looked both fragile and strong. "The foundation's growing," he said. "We just opened another center in Arizona. Your name's on every plaque." "It's not my name that matters," she said. "It's the kids. They're the future." "That's exactly why your name should be there," he said. They stopped near a window overlooking Central Park. The trees below burned with autumn colors, gold and red, like fire turned gentle. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The company, the noise, the power." "Sometimes," he admitted. "Then I remember what power cost me, what it almost took from me." He turned toward her. "I'd rather be here, with this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a keychain shaped like a door engraved with her initials. "What's this?" she asked, smiling. "A reminder," he said, "that the wrong door can still lead you home." She took it, eyes glistening. "You still believe that I live by it?" They stood in silence, the world around them, soft and golden. Then she said quietly, "I never thanked you for coming back." "You don't thank someone for breathing," he said. "It's just what you do when you can't live without it." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You've gotten better at words, only because you gave them back to me." Outside, the light shifted the sun, descending toward the Hudson. The museum began to empty, footsteps fading into echoes. They lingered long after closing, walking hand in hand through the quiet halls. As they reached the exit, Clara looked back one last time at light beyond the door. "It feels strange," she said, "to know the world sees what began as a mistake." "Not a mistake," he said. "A miracle disguised as one." When they stepped outside, the evening air was crisp and clean. The city glowed like a heartbeat, steady and alive. He hailed a cab, but she stopped him. "Let's walk," she said. They wandered through the park, the leaves crunching beneath their feet. Streetlights flickering on one by one. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't opened that door?" she asked. "Every day," he said. "And every time I thank the universe that you did. Even after everything. Especially after everything, the truth, the fall, the silence. It all led here." She squeezed his hand. You think stories like ours last? They do if we keep writing them, he said. Not as headlines, not as spectacle, just as life. When they reached the edge of the lake, the reflection of the city shimmered like a second sky. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. I used to think redemption was rebuilding what I lost, he said. Now I know it's loving what I have. She rested her head against him, the sound of her heartbeat syncing with his. And what do you have, Ethan? You, he said simply. The wind rustled through the trees, scattering golden leaves across the path. They stood there until the last of the light faded and the first stars began to appear. In that moment, it no longer mattered how they'd met or what they'd lost. All that remained was the door they had opened together, the one that led not to wealth or power, but to something far rarer, home. If this story touched you, stay for a moment and breathe with me. Somewhere out there, another person is standing at a closed door, wondering if it's too late to open it. Maybe that person is you. Maybe it's someone you love. She walked into the wrong room. The billionaire in the shower froze. When he saw her was never just about a mistake. It was about what happens when life collides with us in ways we never expect, when we are forced to see beyond fear and into the light of another soul. Ethan and Clara's story reminds us that forgiveness doesn't arrive with fireworks. It walks in quietly through doors we thought were locked forever. If you've ever been misunderstood, judged, or silenced, let this be your reminder. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to survive. Maybe you've doubted yourself after being betrayed. Maybe you've carried guilt for things you couldn't fix. But healing begins when you choose to see light again. Sometimes the right people arrive disguised as chaos. Sometimes the wrong door leads to the right life. What would you do if the universe offered you a second chance? Wrapped in misunderstanding, soaked in rain, waiting behind a door you weren't supposed to open. Would you take it or would you walk away? Don't be afraid to walk in. The story you're meant to live might be waiting just beyond the threshold. Here at Emma's Stories, we tell tales not just about love, but about redemption, the kind that rebuilds broken hearts, that reminds us no one is beyond forgiveness, that even the loneliest rooms can fill with light. If this story moved, you share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, or which moment stayed with you the most, the steam in the hotel, the silence between them, or the final door that opened to light. Every view, every word, every heart that connects keeps this channel alive and helps stories like this reach the people who need them. Don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow I've saved something extraordinary. Another story about love that heals, about people who fall, and about the unexpected ways the universe guides them home. Till then, remember this: no door opens by accident. Every mistake, every storm, every silence, each one, is an invitation to step toward truth. The light is always waiting. You just have to be brave enough to walk in.